coming up, there was no internet. Like
Netflix and Hulu. We didn't have 10 things to choose from. There was Nickelodeon and there was Disney. And that was it.
To present the first ever Nickelodeon Lifetime Achievement Award to a man who's been making all of us laugh for the past 2 decades. Dan Schneider!
2014 Kids' Choice Awards showed that Dan Schneider was Nickelodeon's golden boy.
Welcome down the rabbit hole, friends. It's a sick, sad Nickelodeon-filled rabbit hole, unfortunately. And if you're not aware of who Dan Schneider is, you're going to find out much, much more than you ever hoped to know about one of the most manipulative producers in all of Hollywood. Dan Schneider is a former Nickelodeon producer who has been at the center of controversy in recent years due to extreme allegations of inappropriate behavior towards young actors on his shows. He is the founder of Schneider's Bakery, which isn't actually a bakery at all. It's a production company that produced many popular Nickelodeon shows in the 2000s and 2010s, including iCarly, Victorious, and Drake and Josh. But recently, a 4-part docuseries called Quiet on the Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV, has brought renewed attention to the allegations against Schneider, including claims that he requested massages from female writers and created a toxic work environment.
Years, he shaped children's entertainment and shapes children's culture.
But that's only the beginning of where this new docuseries takes us. All right, so the first episode of this series, it goes into all of the things that Dan Schneider has allegedly done and the way that he was thrown out of Nickelodeon because of his behavior. The thing about Dan is that so much is alleged, but very little is proven. And there's a lot of things that aren't brought into this docuseries, clearly because they don't want to be sued. But I'm going to share some of those things here with you now. And then in a little bit, I'm going to show you the response that Dan Schneider put out just 4 hours ago. All right, so like I said earlier, I didn't really have cable and I didn't know that much about Nickelodeon until a little bit later in my life when I went off to college. I had younger brothers and a couple of times I watched a show called All That with them. One of the stars of this show ended up being Amanda Bynes. You guys, Amanda Bynes knocked my socks off. I was a little bit older, but when I watched her, I felt like I was watching a new generation of Lucille Ball. Eventually, she got her own show called The Amanda Show, and I really believed she was going to grow up to be some kind of major Hollywood star. I really have a big place in my heart, like a soft spot in my heart for Amanda, because she had so much potential and a lot of things have happened to her over the past couple of years that we've all found rather confusing, to say the least. That's for another video, but I do want to point out that some of the allegations and mysteries swirling around Dan Schneider have a lot to do with Amanda Bynes. And some of it comes from the fact that when Amanda had a bit of a mental breakdown and ended up getting mental health help from her family out in California, she began a social media account on which she said some things that a lot of people believe were a part of her psychosis, and some people believe was an opportunity for her to finally speak out honestly about Dan. And I'm going to share some of that here with you now. You'll have to make your own decisions and do your own research regarding what's really going on here, but let's take a look at what this account that is allegedly Amanda Bynes had to say about Dan Schneider.
Amanda Bynes explained the truth about Dan Schneider and Nickelodeon in her secret Twitter account years ago. Ashley's secret account went by the name of Ashley Banks, and she said she created this account at the time because her parents were controlling everything that she was doing, and she wanted the truth to be heard. She was explaining the truth about a lot of different things, including things that had to do with her, her family, and even other people in Hollywood. She was also crying out for help on this Twitter account and saying that they were stealing her money, and that's why she was placed in this conservatorship. She posted pictures of her ID and pictures of herself to show everybody that this was an original account made by her. And here are some of the things that Amanda Bynes said on this Twitter account. I've been forced to deny this account again to prevent them from having me committed against my will again. Can you imagine having an abortion at 13 because your boss impregnated you, committed because your father touched you, exposing the truth and then having your freedom threatened? And honestly, this tweet was probably the most heartbreaking to hear about how she was impregnated when she was 13 by her boss, and who else would have been her boss when she was 13 years old. And I'm not a big person with blind items, but I'm going to read you guys a blind item from Crazy Day and Night, who was known to have a really good relationship with Amanda Bynes. And in this message, she actually puts a secret message in there, and it talks about Dan Schneider. And here is this blind item that has a secret message hidden within this, and this is from Amanda Bynes. And in the beginning of this message, she puts capital letters in weird places, and then you find out what each one of these capital letters is saying. I tried to highlight each word where these capital letters are, just so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. The first capital letter is D, and then an A, and then an N, which would spell Dan, and then D, then I, then D, which would spell did, and then I, and then T, which would spell it. So altogether, this message is saying Dan did it. And that absolutely gives me chills. Because like I said, throughout the rest of this message, there are no capital letters except where they should be. And I'm just going to read you guys the beginning of this blind item because it ties in even more. Last night, after the news broke about a certain producer and actress, all you know who knows the producer as well as anyone who sent me this. Thank you for all your ongoing support. I don't know how any of these men sleep at night, but there is one thing that I do know. It's that what's done in the dark will always come to light. XOXO.
All right, so clearly a lot to swallow there, right? Okay, Amanda, most likely from what we understand about what was alleged to be going on with her at that point in time, was dealing with some major mental health issues. And she was in the process of getting on medication and going through a short conservatorship with her family. But she did make some statements about Dan Schneider, and many people started to wonder if there wasn't some truth to what she was saying. We all watched Amanda take a major turn for the worse during that period of time, and we were wondering why, what led to it, like what from her past contributed to some of this. I have a lot to say about Amanda, but again, that will be in another video. Let me show you now some of the clips of Amanda hanging out with Dan Schneider that people have really questioned over the years.
Hi, welcome to my movie. Today my special guest is the executive producer of the Amanda Show, Dan Schneider.
Hi.
Now you're the executive producer of the show.
Yes, I'm the executive producer and the head writer.
You actually wrote the words we're saying to each other right now.
Yeah. Yes, I wrote this whole conversation that we're having right now.
Since you're the executive producer.
Give me an IC. Can we have an IC before sent to the executive producer?
I see.
Now, IC now. I see now sent to the executive.
Hi, welcome to my movie. And my special guest is the executive producer of the Amanda Show, Dan Schneider.
Hi.
Now, you're the executive producer of the show?
Yeah, I'm the executive producer and I'm the head writer.
You actually wrote the words we're saying to each other right now?
Yes, I actually wrote this whole conversation that we're having right now.
I see. Now, since you're the executive producer of the show, can I have a raise?
No.
Okay. How about a plate of spaghetti?
Nah.
No?
I'm kidding, I'll have some spaghetti. Bring the spaghetti. All right.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Now, this was part of a comedy show, and Dan has a lot to say about this in his response, which he just put out about 4 hours ago. I think it was through Access Hollywood.
Dan, how are you?
I'm okay. I really appreciate you reaching out and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about what we saw over the last 2 nights.
Yes, Dan Schneider is speaking out about the Quiet on the Set documentary, which is kind of a big deal because people have been talking about this for a long time, especially on YouTube. Many YouTube creators have been talking about Dan Schneider and the allegations against him for several years now. And Dan was booted from Nickelodeon and didn't really put out any kind of statement regarding what happened and debunking any of the rumors about him. So this is the first time we've heard from him.
Watching over the past 2 nights was very difficult. Me facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and that I regret. And I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology.
Let's talk about the massages.
Okay.
Watching the content yesterday, it was disturbing.
So tomorrow, we're going to get more into all of the allegations made in the documentary. And one of the allegations is that Dan Schneider put pressure on people to do things like give him massages on set. And that's what he's being asked about in this part of the interview.
It was wrong. It was wrong that I ever put anybody in that position. It was the wrong thing to do. I'd never do it today. I'm embarrassed that I did it then. I apologize to anybody that I ever put in that situation. And even additionally, I apologize to the people who were walking around Video Village or wherever they happened, because there were lots of people there who witnessed it who also may have felt uncomfortable. So I owe them an apology as well.
Right. And I'm someone that does forgive. Some people might say like way too easily. I've even been called an enabler at times in my family because we definitely have a lot of people dealing with some issues. And I tend to be someone who's like, let's give them another chance. But in this particular situation, like what I'm seeing and hearing is this man made millions upon millions of dollars off of children and children's shows. And he was inappropriate on the set of these shows. We don't even know if it goes much deeper than what we're seeing and hearing in this documentary. And that's not really something that you can forgive. And even after he was kicked off of Nickelodeon, it's not as though he went off to completely change his life and give a lot of this money back and go find the families that he disrupted and caused problems for, or find the writers on the sets that he was inappropriate with and make some kind of amends towards them. He's only coming forward with this interview saying that he's sorry because this documentary has been made available nationally, and now everyone is asking questions about what's up with Dan Schneider.
I don't mean to cut you off, but if I can cut right to the chase, let me just say, no writer should ever feel uncomfortable in any writer's room, ever, period, the end, no excuses.
Right. So also in the docuseries, it's exposed that there are writers from back in the day who make accusations that Dan Schneider, he kind of ran his writer rooms where people were allowed to tell like inappropriate jokes, sexual innuendos, and it made a lot of the female writers uncomfortable. And there also were not a lot of female writers hired. So these are some of the allegations that are made. And here we have Dan Schneider saying that he's sorry and he was wrong, but listen to what he has to say next.
Most TV writers, comedy writers have been in writers' rooms, and they are aware that a lot of times there are inappropriate jokes made and inappropriate topics come up.
So Dan says that he's sorry, but then he goes right into letting everyone know that this is just how things are done. I mean, don't you know? These women should have known that too. So it's kind of like a false apology.
But the fact that I participated in that, especially when I was leading the room, it embarrasses me. I shouldn't have done it. And I can tell you why it hurts really bad for me.
I'm going to stop him right there because honestly, I don't need to know how much he's hurting. And I really have to be honest with you that watching this interview, I felt that it was very scripted. Scripted like he scripted all that. Scripted like he scripted all of these children's shows, right? It really seemed like they were reading from cue cards and he had perfectly placed how he wanted to respond to all of these questions. There's so much more to go over here, and I'll be putting out a more full-length video in the coming days, probably tomorrow and the day after. But before I leave you, I want you to see the part of Dan's interview in which he responds to allegations made that many jokes he created and wrote for these TV shows with children were inappropriate. Specifically, jokes about kids massaging their feet or putting their feet in their mouths. Other types of things that honestly, when I was a kid, I would have just thought were supposed to be funny and innocent, but a lot of people are questioning why it came up so frequently in all of his children's shows. He has a response for that.
That some of those jokes are inappropriate for children. What do you think of that?
All these jokes that you're speaking of, that the show covered over the past 2 nights, every one of those jokes was written for a kid audience because kids thought they were funny and only funny. Okay? Now we have some adults looking back at them 20 years later through their lens, and they're looking at them and they're saying, oh, I don't think that's appropriate for a kid show. And I have no problem with that. If that's how anyone feels, let's cut those jokes out of the show. Just like I would have done 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I cut it. I want my shows to be popular. I want everyone to like them.
Dan goes on to make a really big deal about how he sees the reality that he wasn't the only one who okayed these jokes going into these shows. He says, I had a lot of bosses. I had people above me. I had people working around me and underneath me. There were parents that were there on the scene. There were other adults. There were teachers while we were filming. And no one ever said, this joke seems inappropriate. So I'm here to tell you that if it's inappropriate now, let's just go back and act like it never happened. Cut it out of the scene. Once again, there is so much to discuss about this situation in this documentary. It's bringing a lot of new information to the forefront, and it's also leaving some things out, which I want to bring to you here in my videos, like the information about Amanda Bynes. We have so much to discuss and more to talk about in regards to this interview. I hope that you'll join me again tomorrow, friends, so that we can go over this docuseries, address some of these allegations, and look at Dan Schneider's response to all of it. Hope to see you again tomorrow as we head down yet another rabbit hole.